Alright, here's our rangefinder. We can start taking this apart. So I'll find a container to put my screws in and springs and various other bits and pieces. I'll do nicely. First I'll unhook the pin from the back here. Just pull that back to remove the pin. Then I want to loosen this screw. That's often very tight. I'm using a decent sized screwdriver to do this. Got the screw, a plain washer, a wavy washer, and we lift the arm away. For the body of the rangefinder, first I'm going to remove the prism. So we've got two small screws. Pop that to one side. Let's try zooming in a bit. See if we can get this to focus. Two screws here, black painted. The paint scratches easily. Use a good screwdriver. Keep plenty of pressure on the screwdriver before you turn the screw to stop it slipping. That's just a mask that can come off. I don't disturb that semi-silvered mirror. I'll clean that in the rangefinder body. One screw at the back holds the rear lens element in. That mask comes off. We can tip that rear lens out. Now that is flat on one side, convex on the other. The convex side goes inwards, flat side to the rear. That's as far down as that needs to come. I'm going to clean that in an ultrasonic cleaner. I found that to be best. There is a small element in here where that screw is, and basically it's a little lens. You could remove that to help clean things. You would have to remove the mirror, semi-silvered mirror first, because it's got to come out at this end. I don't remove it. If you remove it, you've got to get it back in the right position. This is positioned. If it's mispositioned, you'll find that your image shifts in the finder. As you move your eye across the finder slightly, you'll see that the rangefinder image shifts noticeably, and it makes it impossible to use the split image finder. So it takes an awful lot of effort to get that adjusted correctly. So my advice would be leave that alone. Clean that in the ultrasonic cleaner and nothing else. This section. Now here, this brass bush in the centre with the split in it. That's probably made uniform, but it acts a little bit like an eccentric because of the split, presumably. So what I do is I mark the position of that split on the arm, and I mark with a scratch the top surface of that bush so that I can put that bush back in the same place it came out from. and that was when I'd lifted the arm off, undid the screw and lifted the arm off with the arm back against the body of the rangefinder. So at the infinity position, in other words. If you put it back at a different position, you'll find that your images will have shifted to the left or the right, sometimes by quite a large margin, and it can be a lot more work aligning your rangefinder afterwards. Alright, well, I've cleaned this component in the ultrasonic cleaner, so that's all ready to go, and we can clean up the other components and fit them. So normally I start with a little bit of lighter fluid on a cotton bud and clean this surface on here. That's where it comes up against the body of the rangefinder. Clean the other surface, clean around there, clean in the centre where the brass bush sits. That's as much as I need to do to that. We've got to come back and clean the glass on that yet. We need to clean our brass bush, that washer, that plain washer, and that wavy washer. Again, it's the same deal. Bit of lighter fluid on a cotton bud, and I'm just making sure I remove any old grease. Sometimes the grease may be hardened. It's going to need extra work to clean it off. In this case, it's not too bad. And I'm just removing that old grease. One of the reasons for removing it is to get rid of any traces of dust or grit or dirt that's got in there, and we don't want any of them. So that's our mechanical components. Just put them to one side. And we can deal with the optical side of it. We've got our rear lens element there, our front element, and our prism. So with a cotton bud and a little bit of domestic glass cleaner, put a little bit on the end of a cotton bud, and I'll start with this piece. And I can see that that front surface is pretty grimy. And the same for the inside surface. Be careful when using a cotton bud doing a job like this. It's easy for threads to get trapped under the frame of the glass, and then you've got a hell of a job getting rid of it afterwards. So I'll start with a fresh cotton bud and move to doing the prism on the Retina IIa. The prism is silvered. It's got a black paint coating on that surface, so you can do nothing about that. So you've only got two surfaces to clean. The front surface, the one that you see from the outside, and the inside surface. That looks good. I'll just give that a puff to blow out any dust. And we have our rear lens there. So I'm dealing with the curved surface, the convex surface, which goes to the inside, and I can drop that, flip that lens over, drop it into the frame. That'll hold it nicely while I deal with the other surface. This is not very bad at all. They're often quite grimy. That's quite good. While I've got it there, I'll put its retainer mask back on. I'll just move over to a cleaner piece of the paper here, since I'm laying it down on that surface. We have the front mask. It's important to take that off. If you do use an ultrasonic cleaner, it's important to take this off first, because otherwise the ultrasonic cleaner will clean the paint off it very efficiently and you'll have to repaint it. And you can guess how I know things like that. It's not picking up the thread. That's better. I'm just checking here to make sure that this surface of the mask is not protruding down below the base of the rangefinder and that it's all nice and square. If it protruded down below, the arm would catch on it, rub on it, and there'd be a high friction point there. And you'd be left wondering why the rangefinder didn't track correctly back to infinity when you'd moved back in that direction. Alright, so our arm can go back on. Just use this as an anvil to assemble things on. So I'll just give this a wipe with molybdenum paste on the inside. And the wavy washer needs the same. Make sure that the high points pick up a little bit. And don't let it whiz off into the distance like that. Oh, there it is. Should have used a better pair of tweezers. So I need to put my brass bush back into the right position, so I'm checking which was the upper surface, the one that I carefully put a scratch on so I could tell. And it's that one. And my alignment mark is here. I'll rotate that till that alignment mark is in the right spot. That can go on the body of the rangefinder. Now, I'll take a bit more molybdenum paste, and this is, you use very little of this. You just put enough on there to make it dirty, really. And I see that the spring has just fallen off the arm, so I have to hook that back into place. That's very inconvenient. Find another pair of tweezers with a bit more guts. I think we'll use that end. One end of this is a bit more opened up than the other. So, arm into place. Let's move back down here. Wavy washer in place. Plain washer in place. Take our screw. Get it started. make sure the arm is back against the body in the infinity position. Nip that screw up tight. Refit the pin through the spring, so I just tip the body away so that I can get at that end of that spring. And my camera is busy telling me that the battery is nearly flat, which is weird because it's just been fully charged. See if I can get this through here before the camera stops functioning. That's what we want. And stretch that out and hook it into place like that. Check that the arm moves freely and returns. Pop the prism back into the body, lens facing to the front, and we have two little screws. These serve as adjustment screws. You can adjust the vertical alignment of your rangefinder image. Check that that prism is back snug in the body. Dip those screws up lightly and evenly. And I'll align that by looking out of the window. Now my moving image is very, very high. So I screw down, tighten up the rear screw. It's still slightly high, but it's looking a lot better. Tighten it down a bit more. That is slightly low now. I tighten the front screw, which lifts the moving image. I'm just swinging the arm on the rangefinder body and looking at an infinity target. It's not bad for height. This is a very finicky adjustment. You'll get tired of doing it. A little bit this way, a little bit the other way. Tiny, tiny adjustments. That's okay vertically, and horizontally it comes back beyond the infinity position. So I'm going to just adjust this stop here, which is the rest position. Tighten it up slightly. That's bang on. So that rangefinder is ready to go back on the camera. Well, it looks like my battery issue had nothing really to do with the battery at all, and was simply slightly dirty battery contacts in the camera. And hopefully everything will go smoothly from here on in. So we need to reattach our rangefinder to the top of the camera body. So that's our next task. So normally here, there's a couple of things I want to do. I need to use my molybdenum paste and just rub a little bit on that cam surface, very little. Never use much of that. And I want to put some lacquer on here, just a couple of little spots to stop the rangefinder from shifting once it's all screwed down into place, because they're certainly prone to doing that if the camera's dropped, if it receives some sort of shock. So I've moved my advanced lever out of the way so that I can see things better. I'll slide the rangefinder into position and find the screws. Line up the hole. Eye drops the screw down into position. Run it up lightly. Find its mate. Again, eye drops, like playing marbles or something. Drop it into the hole. It should go with a bit of luck. It didn't. Well, this is the magnetic screwdriver roll. I'll use that magnetic quality today. We'll use it to hold the screw. What I normally do at this point is I keep some pressure on the front of the rangefinder to push the rangefinder back on the body as far as it will go, evenly, and then nip those two screws up, or I can get this screwdriver to bite. And there we have the rangefinder fitted. We still have to adjust it to make sure that the infinity position is correct, but at least it's back on the body. I'll just check how I look for that out the window now. Now my moving image is slightly low. And it doesn't quite come to infinity, so I'll check that I've got that correct by closing the front, which will allow this to drop back to its stop. That's good. So it's an adjustment on the arm. Here's our lock screw. Here's the lock screw, here's our adjuster. Leave this one at the end alone unless you really need to play with it. So I'll loosen the lock screw slightly and I'll rotate this one just slightly. It puts a bit of slack in the arm effectively. Allows it to drop all the way back, and it's all but there. Just a tiny bit more. The adjustments you make are so small you can hardly feel them. That's good. Now do up the lock screw. Sometimes that shifts things slightly, and it has in this time. A little bit more. I'm sitting right beside the window here, and I've got a choice of targets. Which makes it very convenient. That's it, I'm quite happy with that. That rangefinder is good. I've locked the lock screw, it's staying in place. So our rangefinder is good, our film advance is good. We can fit the front door next, I think. We're ready to fit the front door now, I think. So, what do we do? Usually I start with a little bit of grease. This is the synthetic grease. Put a little bit on the pins here. And mostly what I'm wanting to do there is retain those paper washers, because they have a habit of falling off while you're trying to fit things. And if they fall off, there's a good chance they'll get damaged, and then you've got to make new ones, which is very tedious. So I'll get that sorted out. I'll find my 2 screws for the hinge pins, and we have 2 washers that went at top and bottom of the door. Yeah, let's just get that lever back against the body. I'm making sure my shutter release shaft doesn't fall out of the body. So what I normally do is this. I normally hook that top pin into place, put some pressure on the door to stretch it out, and then hook the bottom pin into place in the bottom slot. Then we need to put our spacer washers and our hinge pins in place. Now these two were not quite the same. Well, I thought they were not quite the same. They look, there's not much difference between them. It may be an optical illusion, so I'll get one into place. Make sure that the screw hole is all lined up. Drop in the hinge pin screw and run that up. That can be done up tight. Flip the camera over. Now I'm keeping my finger on the shutter release button while I do this, because I don't want that shaft falling out. So we can peel back our leather. So to do that, we need to take that single screw out there. Lift off that surround. It's reluctant today. I don't know why. It fitted well enough yesterday. Lift back the leather. Slide our washer into place between the door and the camera body. That's quite a snug fit. Pull it into place with the tip of my tweezers. Drop the hinge pin screw into position. Run that screw up tight. I'll flip that leather back, now carefully getting my finger onto that shutter release button before it gets away. Oh, I'm too late. That washer, spacer washer that I mentioned, has fallen out. Now it's hard to get to that because we have fresh grease floating around in there, and it will have managed to stick itself somewhere and will be a bugger to find. Right, well, I'll be back in half an hour once I've discovered what I've done with it. Well, I did find that washer. It was stuck sitting inside the body, just about where I expected it would be. So I'll do a rerun of this. But this time I might get more cunning. I've put the washer in place. I'll put my door in place. I'll put the spacer washer in at the top. I'll get that hinge pin screw in place. It doesn't want to pick up the thread, that's better. Our shutter release can drop back into position. Make sure its spring is on there. Lower that into position. We'll put the top on it. We have the spring for our film release button. That can drop into place. Our film release button can drop into place. Now I'm going to remove the arm from the film advance lever. I've got it sitting at 90 degrees out from the body, so I know where to put it back in. So remove the screw. Lift the arm off. This is the cunning bit. Fit the top cover. Put the advance lever back on. We can get it centered up. Just rotate this until I hear it click into place. I think that's it. Drop the screw back on and run that up. But I don't tighten it right down until I'm sure that I've got everything working correctly there. It feels good. Check that my frame counter works, and it does. It's advancing the film. Alright, I can put one screw in the top cover at this end. Now my top cover can't come off. My shutter release cannot fall out. So I can't lose that spacer washer that was giving me so much grief. Our spacer goes between the door and the body. Pull that into line with the point of my tweezers. Find the hinge pin screw. Find the right screwdriver, I suppose, would help. Run that screw home. Check that the film advance and the release are running nicely. Check that the door opens and closes correctly. Smooth, no slack, that's all good. Now I can glue the leather back down on the base of the camera, and that part of the job will be done. So first I'll inspect the leather, see if there's any loose fragments I need to peel off. It doesn't look too bad. So I'll get some cigarette lighter fluid on the end of a cotton bud. Give that body a good wipe, just to remove any grease that might have accumulated on there while I've been working. Do the same to the leather, so that the adhesive will take as well as it possibly can. Find my adhesive, find a toothpick for spreading the adhesive. Here we have it. Have another look at that leather, just make sure I've got all the scraps and loose bits off there, because they will otherwise inevitably fold back and end up with bumps. Right, so adhesive to the leather. Spread that out carefully with a toothpick. Making sure the edges in particular are covered. Haven't quite got enough on there. And I want to take care that these bits right back down here have got sufficient adhesive too. I'll just put a little drop there that I can transfer across on the toothpick. Pick that up, run it back down under that loose edge. That's good. Likewise right back here. Okay, that all looks good. I'll drop that leather into place. Smooth it out. See that it's pressed in evenly. And run the end of a pair of tweezers round that rewind button surround to make sure that that leather is stuck down firmly, pushed back into the body. As ice bumps are gone, the leather's not exactly dead flat, but the ice bumps are gone. That is probably one of the hazards of peeling leather, is that if it's glued particularly well and it delaminates like that, there's a reasonable chance that it'll never be dead flat again. You have two screws holding that tripod socket surround down. The screws doing this job are shorter on the Retina IIa than the similar screws on the later cameras. So if you're robbing cameras for parts, be aware they're not a straight swap. They need to be short on the Retina IIa. One of them needs to be short, the other one you can get away with. I can't remember exactly which one it is. That's to stop it, prevent it fouling the rewind button. Okay, I've got a customer here, back shortly. Right, the visitor has finished his business here, so that's the end of that. I'm just going to put the screw in the end of the case here at this end now and just close up the body completely. I'll put the rewind knob on there just out of tidiness. The next task is to strip and clean the shutter. And almost inevitably we'll have the body back apart at some stage, because almost certainly the synchronisation of the release of the shutter itself and the release of the film advance will need adjustment of some sort. But in the meantime, the body of the camera is together. Frame counter works correctly, focus is nice and smooth, opens and shuts, rangefinder is good, accessory shoe panel beated back into shape. The Zeiss bumps, those two big Zeiss bumps that were very prominent on the back of the camera, were here and here. They're gone. The leather's a little bit lighter at that point, just because the raised Zeiss bumps meant that the leather got scuffed there by when the camera was being held. A little bit of polish on there, black wax shoe polish, and you'll never know. So, body to one side, and think about the next task. And the next task is dealing with the lens and shutter assembly.